record. Yes.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes. So since this is being recorded, thank you so much for joining us. Like, this is Semri. We are here for a roundtable discussion on reimagining higher education in developing countries. We've got different speakers from different parts of the world, from South Africa, from Nigeria, from India, and from Ecuador. Professor Varsha Jain is a co-editor on the book on reimagining higher education that has been published by Palgrave. She has the floor to give us some insight about higher education and reimagine it, especially with regards to the pandemic. And that will be followed up by different presentations from different speakers. Thank you. Professor Varsha, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, all the co-editors, as well as the co-authors and the contributors. Really appreciated your efforts. It was quite a challenging time, as Emmanuel has mentioned, primarily for the developing countries to cope up with the challenges that we had with the technology and other infrastructure challenges, which we had for the last 2 years in the pandemic. But I think we have all coped up very well. And the whole idea was to come up with this book and help all the stakeholders who are working into the area of higher education, and how the challenges were there and how we coped it up in terms of providing the pathway. And I think this book is quite interesting, and I would appreciate all the contributors here, because they have figured out a different type of areas under which the developing countries have worked. So I'll just give a snapshot of what we have actually done, what were the key lessons, and then probably, the other speakers would talk about their own work specifically into their areas. So I'm sharing the screen. I have a few slides, not much. But just to give you a heads up in terms of the overview of what we have done. So, Emmanuel, I would have to request you to make me the co-host so that I can share my screen.
Okay. Okay, so Professor Varsha,
Okay. Thank
okay.
you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
You. So, here we are in terms of, what were the focus areas of the book? So primarily we focused on what were the transformations, innovations, and I think developing countries, as we have to focus on, optimal resources, we focus more on innovations, which is what you would see in the book and the contributions which all our authors have provided. We have also reflected on some critical areas and challenges which were there across all the nations in the developing countries for the higher education. And there were a lot of value systems and leaderships and all of that front in terms of the human aspects, which are also being reflected in the book. So basically, the objective of this particular book was to bring out all the scenarios which were related to the higher education. And there were a lot of shifts which we all have undergone as the stakeholders of higher education in the pandemic. So we wanted to bring that up so that we can have the key lessons and the learnings from it. And we also spoke about that how these transformations were actually taken care in the developing countries, primarily with the tech environment. So that was something which was very important aspect of the book that we covered. And as I mentioned earlier, that we also focused on the culture, leadership, and the adoption of AI into the higher education as well in this particular book. So I think this was a very interesting work which we undertook during this time. So what were the key findings? Primarily, in terms of the key finding, is talk about the blended learning. It talks about the hybrid learning ecosystems that we would be using now. And I think people have got adjusted with the technology. So we will be continuing with that blended learning. And we would be using a lot of AI and other advanced tools to ensure that the learning is comprehensive and is aligned with our stakeholders, and students would appreciate that. And besides that, it would also lead to a lot of collaborations and partnerships with all the stakeholders, primarily academia and industry. And as we all know that this generation is more about DIY, so probably it will be more of a self-driven skill-based learning, which would happen in these particular aspects. That's what we found. And then the last part is what were the implications? So primarily the implications are for the administration. It's more about the new learning ecosystems, global reach out for partnerships and collaborations. I think that would be leading to the co-creation of knowledge. And this pandemic has widened those particular aspects very clearly, because in the hybrid systems, we can reach out to anybody in the world. And that's what I think the developing countries have also focused on, to create and ensure those learning environment to the students and the stakeholder. And for the student and the faculty, it's more about the advanced skill sets, primarily in the tech area, to ensure that the learning are not being, taken care of in a very positive way. And the industry front is more better job opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, nationwide and the worldwide opportunities which are being provided. So it's very easy to get people on board and create those learning environment. And finally, at the societal front, I think we spoke a lot about technology, but developing countries is also about the human aspects and the self-reliance aspect of the human capital. So we always say that it's a human tech environment which has to be created for all the stakeholders so that the learning can be offered very easily. So that was the snapshot about the book. And thank you so much for providing the time and sharing my insights about the book. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Varsha. It's a pleasure to have you on board and for you to share those insights. So you have provided a general overview, but I think now we want to actually listen to individual speakers for them to share with us their own experience, their own insight, specifically around the topic they have addressed. So we have two sections. So after each section, we have a question and answer. So please, if you have any question for the speakers, please keep it to end of the section for us to talk about that. So in the first section, we have Dr. Samia, she's from University of Free State in South Africa. That will be followed by Dr. Otilia from University of Johannesburg in South Africa. That will be followed by Dr. Ariana from Ecuador, and also Dr. Malvis from Great Zimbabwe University in Zimbabwe. So after those four speakers, then we will have a set of questions. So Dr. Samia, we invite you now to take over and share with us your insight about reimagining higher education post-pandemic in developing countries. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you for this introduction. I would like to start by thanking the editors for their foresight and for inviting us, to begin reflecting about what we can learn from the pandemic. And we wrote our contributions while we were still right in the middle of it. And of course, here in South Africa, we are just coming out of a 2-year national lockdown, and it looks as if we're going into the 5th wave of the pandemic now. So we are still talking from the pandemic, not post-pandemic. I think that's quite important in everything that we say. And of course, thank you so much to the organizers of today's roundtable for giving me an opportunity to come and speak to my contribution to the book and to represent the southernmost point of the African continent, together with my colleague Otilia from the University of Johannesburg. It's an honor for me to kick us off. So I would like to start by positioning my paper and myself, so that you understand where I'm coming from and what influences my views. So the perspectives that I represented in my contribution are primarily those of a practitioner scholar in higher education internationalization. I have a particular focus and interest in international collaboration and partnerships, particularly between universities in what we call the global north and their counterparts in the global south. And of course, my perspectives are very much informed by the South African context and experience. So as a point of departure in my chapter, I note that I look at COVID-19 as an education crisis. In the topic of the book, of course, we talk about it as a health crisis, which of course it is primarily, but of course it also constitutes a crisis for many other sectors of and spheres of our life. And I am particularly concerned with higher education in this instance. And there, COVID, I think, has acted as a great disruptor, particularly for internationalization activities and agendas of universities. But I think it is also important to look at it as an accelerator of change. And so crisis is also understood as a moment that brings about decisive change. And I am particularly concerned with the role that international partnerships can play in creating more equitable and more inclusive higher education environments. So in my chapter, I start by discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the South African higher education sector in general. And then, of course, my specific focus is on internationalization. There are three key points that I make that I will just briefly touch on here. First is that I think COVID-19 has reaffirmed the need for and the importance of internationalization, particularly as it facilitates international collaboration to tackle global challenges and find locally relevant solutions. But also, of course, internationalization makes a contribution to fostering inclusion and social cohesion by highlighting the value that different people, cultures, countries bring into our global debates. The second point that I make is that COVID has accelerated innovation in many spheres, but also in higher education and higher education internationalization around the ways that we work, study, conduct research, collaborate, network, etc., etc. The very fact that we are here today with people from all around the world and we are all sitting in our offices or homes is, I think, testament to that. And the last point that I think is quite important in terms of the impact of COVID is that it has entrenched inequalities. In South Africa, a very unequal society with a very unequal higher education system, inequality is a characteristic that has been further exacerbated by the pandemic. Prof. Varsha, you spoke about access to technology, for example, access to online learning, or the ability on behalf of institutions to offer that. So I think that is something that we have to keep in mind. And of course, inequality was also a factor that affected internationalization in the country. And so both the pandemic and the internationalization are not equalizing forces in the South African higher education sector. I think that's quite important to draw a parallel there. And with this in mind, I reflect on in my chapter on what the future of international partnerships could look like. As mentioned at the beginning here, it's important to look at the COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis that has disrupted and interrupted the world as we know it, but that offers us an opportunity to bring about positive change. And I'd like to just briefly reflect on what that could mean in the space of internationalization and international partnerships. One of the dominant features of internationalization was the dependence on physical mobility. So to move people around the world, students, staff, to go to partner institutions, conferences, et cetera, et cetera. And the other element that I look at is that North-South partnerships in higher education were really predominantly following practices that disproportionately benefit institutions and people in the North. So again, that inequality element that I mentioned is important here. And so the question for me becomes, what does it mean to create more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive international engagements? From the perspective of the Global South, this is not a new endeavor. It's not something that came about as a result of the pandemic, but it has certainly been accelerated and gained traction during the pandemic, I think. And so I argue, and this very much aligns with the presentation that you made, Prof. Varsha, I argue in my chapter that we need to look at both the human element and the technology element of it. So because people, of course, make up institutions, people are the basis for partnerships. And what I have found is that the pandemic has caused or has led to a growing awareness of the imbalances and inequalities in international partnerships, and also a willingness to actually put those on the table and address them and find solutions. And from a South African perspective, decolonial approaches to education and to internationalization, I think really facilitate that and facilitate a focus on, common humanity and the human element that we have to be taken into account when we look at partnerships and where we want to take them in the future. And of course, the second one is the technological aspect. We live in the fourth industrial revolution, and I think COVID has, of course, brought about immense changes in the way that we work using technology. And I think we have to embrace that going forward, to continue to find new ways in which we can communicate with each other, network with each other, exchange ideas, collaborate, etc. And in internationalization, physical mobility has in many instances, for example, replaced or complemented by virtual mobility. We talk about virtual exchanges. And of course, we also have collaborative online international learning, COIL programs, which have gained momentum during the pandemic and I think need to continue. So in terms of concluding and perhaps sharing, what are some of the key takeaways, apologies, I'd like to start by sharing an African proverb. And that is that every misfortune is a blessing. So I think we agree that COVID has been a great misfortune for many of us. But the blessing part of it is that it really provides us with an opportunity to reflect and pause and think about how we can bring about positive change. So in the field of internationalization, I think it is important that we really continue to focus on and further develop the positives that have emerged from this crisis. So we need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to find ways in which we can engage internationally without flying people around the globe, for example, focusing on exchanging ideas and knowledge rather than on moving people around. And I think this is something that can bring about and can foster inclusion by providing access to people and institutions who predominantly were not able to take up international opportunities simply because of socioeconomic challenges and the inability to afford it. But of course, reducing physical mobility also makes a valuable contribution to environmental sustainability and our well-being all around this planet that we call home. And so from an internationalization perspective, just in conclusion, I think it is very important that we do not return to what was considered normal before the pandemic. We have to heed the lessons that we have learned in its wake, and then we are still learning them because we are still in the pandemic in many ways. And we have to really look at how can we create different international partnerships in the future, which are more equitable and inclusive. And in that way, the pandemic has an opportunity to become that watershed moment, or as Arundhati Roy said in her 2020 article, a portal into a different future that hopefully is better for all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Samia, for sharing those insights. Yes, I guess another debate that we could have sometimes is, are we global north? Are we global north or global south? Are we developing countries? Are we emerging economy? I think that's always an ongoing conversation. But I think I like that idea of the global north. At least geographically, we can recognize that. We've talked about the experience inequalities and also the North-South partnership, but ultimately it's about for us to reflect and to pause and see what we can do. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure there'll be some questions. We come back after the third presentation out to speak on that. Thank you so much. The next person will be Dr. Otilia from University of Johannesburg, South Africa. So, Dr. Otilia, nice meeting you. It's a pleasure to see you. So, thank you so much. The floor is yours. You've got about 10 minutes for you to just tell us about your reflection, about your contribution, and what you think about reimagined higher education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel, and I would like to thank Samia for thanking you on my behalf. So first of all, before I start my presentation, I would like to acknowledge my co-author, Professor Felix Maringe. So the chapter aims around the first aim was to make a theoretical contribution towards understanding the efficacy of responses by universities in South Africa to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And secondly, it was to assess what needs to be done to build resilient organizations. So in the chapter, we have argued that the COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered hidden weaknesses in our higher education institutions, and such weaknesses include the overdependence on a tried and tested approach to delivering education through face-to-face instruction. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And the second weakness is to do with normalizing the inequalities and making them invisible. And thirdly, the weakness is to do with, very weak predictive and transformative capacities. And the fourth one is not having a plan B when things go wrong. So as a result, the pandemic shook the foundations of higher education. How have the foundations shaken? One, turning to an alien and little understood remote teaching and learning. And secondly, there was a sudden uncovering of sheer size and magnitude of inequalities. Thirdly, the unmasking of the middle class value system of our universities, while the majority of students and society more broadly are typically kind of typical poor working class citizens. So we decided to adopt the theory of resilience to frame how to understand how universities have gone, in terms of, doing away with the weaknesses and what should be done to make them more resilient. So the theory is 4 capacities. The first one, which is the adaptive capacity, focuses on a passive form of resilience, which nevertheless ensures stability. And the second capacity is the adaptive, which allows incremental change and involves university leaders making deliberate efforts to adjust, especially in adverse circumstances. The third capacity is the anticipative capacity, which is the ability to stay prepared and plan for an unseen challenge. And lastly, the transformative capacity, which involves universities leadership making deliberate efforts to perform systemic and structural changes. So what have universities done so well in times of COVID-19? We see that universities have enacted so well in terms of adaptive and adaptive capacities, where in adaptive capacity, they acted quickly to circumvent the spread and effects of the virus, while at the same time ensuring continuity of the core business of the organization. However, they didn't look closely into the low-income households and students who couldn't, get means of going online in as far as remote teaching and learning was concerned. In the adaptive capacity, we see that, of course, they successfully migrated to remote teaching and learning. However, not much flexibility was given in terms of time for attendance, the variety of learning materials, submission formats, assessment flexibility, and task completion times. So we further argued that the universities were able to enact adoptive and adaptive capacities to a very less extent. However, when it comes to the anticipative and transformative capacities, they barely did nothing on those ones. So our main focus now was how can we better prepare universities to be in a position to act adequately all the four capacities. So we started by, trying to look at predictive and transformative capacities, where we said that the sectors do not seem to have a strong tradition in anticipating futures, and so tends to focus on the here and now, leaving questions of posterity largely unattended to. There also appears to be an overwhelming sense of a desire to return to the old normal, which Delvin suggests must be resisted. In terms of transformative capacity, universities constantly ask questions about which knowledge is of the greatest worth for teaching, learning, and research endeavors within the sectors. So if we try to move towards, asking such questions, we assume that we can, develop resilient organization. So what do we need to do now, as academics? We should actually aim to create resilient organizations around 4 core university responsibilities. We have already discussed the 4 capacities, and now we want to integrate them with what happens within the universities, which talks to curriculum, pedagogy, research, and innovation, and societal engagement, and try to strengthen those. So we see the pandemic both as having presented universities with the sets of unique challenges, but at the same time, having created a substantial opportunities to reimagine the future. So in terms of the curriculum, we think that universities in the developing world must look into 3 places to begin a process of transforming their purposes and goals. So the 3 places are the past, the present, and the future, so that we understand the education system as a whole. In terms of, the pedagogy, we advocated Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed and the pedagogies of the poor. And then in terms of research, we should build a case for the decolonization of research in African universities and in the less developed world, including the post-colonial societies. In terms of partnerships, like what Samia was talking about, Africa's solutions continue to be detected by the rich countries of the North. So we suggested new ways of conceptualizing partnerships, their funding, and the location of the basic science processes, and it should be imagined in ways that enhance the efficacy of solutions on the African continent. So all in all, our suggestion is around, trying to merge the resilient theory and then the 4, factors around the universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Otilia, for sharing that with us. Like, yes, I think we recognize the challenges of universities trying to focus on here and now. I think that's something that we want to move away from. I think you also align well with Dr. Samia about the need for us not to desire to go back to that old normal. We need to go forward, think about the past, the present, and the future. I thank you so much for sharing that insight. My regards to Professor Felix Maringe. He has been a very supportive person. My regards to him. We wish him all the best. We hope to see him sometime soon. Like, yes, please send our greetings to him. Please wait behind. We still got some. We might still have some questions for you. But now, let me invite Dr. Ariana. Is she here with us? Oh, wow, wow. Okay. Can't find. Wow. Okay. If you don't mind, then I'm sure Dr. Mavis, you are ready to go, right?
Okay, it's fine.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Emmanuel. I want to share the screen.
Okay. So okay. Allow. Okay. Okay. So share. No. So there should be security. I'm coming, please. Cancel.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay. Yes. How about now?
Okay, let me. Okay. Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. I'm opening my document, but I just want to acknowledge. I just want to acknowledge the co-authors. I co-authored the chapter with Swanda Fortune and Tari Joseph from Grace Zimbabwe University. And our topic was emergency remote instruction in times of COVID-19 pandemic. We're just looking at the experiences of educators at Zimbabwe higher education institution. So there were two major problems. The first problem was looking at challenges or factors.
Your screen is not showing. Your presentation is not showing. If you are aware, we can't see your PowerPoint.
You can't see it.
I can't see it. Can somebody confirm if they can see? I can only see your folder.
No, we cannot see.
We cannot see. I cannot
Okay.
see the screen.
Okay. Maybe you need to open it because we can see your folder. I see nuts and bolts. I see remarks. So I see what you want to open.
Okay. Let me.
Okay.
Check.
If you can see it, then maybe you stop sharing and you just talk to us from your slide.
Okay, I can just stop sharing. Okay, it's fine.
Stop sharing. So we see your face, but we know you are presenting from a slide. So don't worry.
It's okay. It's fine.
Okay.
We have two major problems, and the first problem we're looking at barriers or factors that militated against effective teaching and learning in higher education institutions in Zimbabwe. We just used two provinces, that is Masvingo and Midlands. Then the second problem, we're exploring opportunities and potential strategies for preparing higher education institutions to be resilient and agile in terms of uncertainties like the COVID-19 pandemic, and also in terms of shocks. So I just want to briefly look at the contextual background of the issue. So we are saying, as part of the COVID-19 containment measures, the World Health Organization declared the disease a pandemic on the 11th of March. And to be specific, in particular, Zimbabwe, the government declared a state of emergency on 17 March, and resultantly, higher education institutions were instructed to close operations by the 24th of March 2020. As a result of that, universities, colleges, and other tertiary institutions cancelled classes. So in a majority of instances, online learning was encouraged. Then the methodology, we just adopted a qualitative research methodology approach. This also permitted us to understand the lived experiences of different educators employed at different universities during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also collected data for this current study using in-person interviews as well as open-ended questionnaires. But because of the pandemic, as a COVID-19 containing measures, the interviews were via telephone, Skype, and Zoom interviews, and the questionnaires were administered online. And we gathered data from teacher training colleges and universities. And among the universities, we have the state-owned universities, as well as mission-owned universities and teacher training colleges. And purposive sampling and convenient sampling were utilized to select 6 key informants from each participating institution and 30 educators from the 6 higher education institutions. So we have the major findings. Interviews held with key informants and also with the educators revealed that there are 4 common challenges. The first one being internet-related challenges. The second one being lack of investment on online infrastructure. Third being lack of e-learning training. And 4, low uptake of technology by students. Maybe I just need to briefly explain each of the challenge. The first challenge of internet-related challenges, generally in the country we have challenges of internet. The lines we are using, be it Econet, Net1, with challenges of internet, and we have some people are living in areas where there is low to no network at all. So that was the main challenge that affected effective teaching and learning during the pandemic. Then the other item, the lack of investment on online infrastructure, as earlier highlighted, most of the institutions in developing nations, they specifically in Zimbabwe are used to face-to-face learning, teaching and learning, rather than online teaching. So as a result, institutions have not invested to online infrastructure. Then the issue of lack of e-learning training. The educators were just instructed to just go and teach students. They should lecture online, but there was no proper training before teaching and learning online. Then generally, most of the students, there was lack of training, and as such, there was low uptake of technology by students. Students were not able to attend lectures using the recommended Google Class or e-Canvas. However, we noted that non-state institutions fare better than state-run institutions, that is in provision of infrastructure that support online teaching and learning. And we realized that most of the educators, the majority in fact, they were not ready to adopt emergent remote instruction in performing their duties. A number of educators and as well as students were not technologically savvy to cope with the fast changing trends for online teaching and learning. On the other hand, despite the fact that the students and educators were also not ready to adopt to the fast changing trends, on the other hand, there was lack of preparation and also little consumption of online platforms by the higher education management itself. Then the other issue, most institutions in Zimbabwe, as I earlier highlighted, they are structured in a manner that promotes face-to-face learning rather than the hybrid mode of teaching that combines online and physical learning. And while the educators expect to be provided with the internet-related material, they were expecting training from the institution. The management assumed that all educators, if boards fit for working from home, and learning should continue as normal. I think we all understand that SADC at one time, they adopted this mantra that learning should never stop during the pandemic. But the preparation was not done. They just assumed that all educators and all higher tertiary education institutions, if boards fit for working from home, and learning should just continue as normal. So such attitudes are part of the institution's failure to create appropriate homework environment for educators. Then the second part of our problem that was focusing on profiling suggestions and measures, the chapter or profile suggestions that is towards reimagining educational features that would transform the current higher education systems that prefer face-to-face learning, so that these higher education systems, they are resilient, they are also empowering and enfranchising during times of emergencies, especially during times of pandemics like the COVID-19 pandemic. As Zimbabweans, higher education institutions readjust and adapt in light of the COVID-19, there is also a need for creative and pragmatic approaches of delivering lectures. Hybrid approaches must be customized so that they suit different challenges facing specific institutions. Furthermore, there is need for ICT skills sets in learners and teachers, which must be upped. ICT skills must be a requirement for all teachers and instructors at higher education institutions. Then the other thing that when we were drawing lessons from this start, higher education institutions must also develop customized platforms for remote teaching and learning that expends less data, that are easy to navigate, and that are highly accessible by all educators as well as learners. Higher education institutions should also build virtual learning environments that guarantee access to internet and availability of computers, laptops, tablets, etc. to educators and learners. Then the other idea, it was just mentioned by the previous presenter, this study also provides a suggestion that higher education teaching must shift from pedagogical approaches to andragogical approaches that are participatory. Why? Because we need the approaches that allow learners to contribute to the learning processes. And again, educators must be trained in new approaches to teaching, especially hybrid teaching and methods that encourage collective learning and teaching. In conclusion, this study demonstrated that there was lack of preparedness among educators in adopting and adapting to emergence, online teaching and technology demands in higher education institutions during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, it also exposed the challenging experiences of educators in adopting and adapting to emergence remote learning on one hand, and also the availability and also the availability of infrastructures that facilitate emergency remote instruction. On the other hand, it also exposed the unpreparedness of higher education institutions in Zimbabwe. Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel.
That's all right. Thank you, so, Dr. Mavis, for sharing that with us. Like, yes, I got that expression about the need for the, I think I wrote it down. Education should not stop. Education should never stop. Even when we know that we have a different struggles, when people do not even have access to internet, when people do not have access to infrastructures, the lecturers are not vast in ICT. So sometimes education, the pandemic can stop the education. Thank you so much. I guess I just want to open the floor for any questions. I've got some questions for the speakers, but perhaps if you have any questions for the three speakers before we proceed, it's time to ask the questions. So while we are still waiting for the questions, please do let me know. Maybe you raise up your hand or you put it in the chat. I will start with Dr. Samia, please. Thinking about internationalization in times now, okay, within the pandemic, what do you anticipate universities in the global, what do you call it, global north? Thinking about internationalization with global south, what do you think they should be mindful of as we go away from this pandemic now?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Well, I think this speaks to something that I briefly touched on earlier, where I said that I think the COVID pandemic, because it is a pandemic that has affected everyone around the world, albeit differently, but it has affected everyone, that there is an increased willingness and awareness in institutions in the global north about inequalities that exist at a global level. And so I think there is more possibility now, and it's the responsibility of Southern institutions to bring those challenges and inequalities into the conversations and to drive the change. So in the partnership space, for example, it's important to say that both sides, both in the North and in the South, have an important role to play in bringing about that change. And so I think in that sense, it's really important to keep the momentum going. You know, we are now at a time where a lot of the internationalization activities that came to a grinding halt during the pandemic, when, you know, campuses were closed, borders were closed. Now we are seeing that borders are reopening, people start moving again. And I think it's really important that we do not lose all of the gains that we had made in the last 2 years, but that we keep going. And so, for example, focusing on technology, and of course, we have heard now from a number of speakers that it's not always as easy as it sounds, because we have inequalities here and we have difficulties with large numbers of our student populations who, you know, were not able to access online learning. I think the others have spoken about the challenges in detail, so I don't want to go into that too much. But I do think that an increased awareness at the global level, and for me, in what I have seen over the last 2 years, also an increased willingness to actually engage and find solutions together. So I think that is a very important lesson from this pandemic that hopefully we need to take forward, but it won't happen. It won't happen, you know, all by itself. We're going to have to work for it and work very hard.
Right. Yes, thank you. And again, that's why we are raising this kind of awareness for us to recognize that. Thank you so much for your wonderful insight always. Thank you. Dr. Fred, you've raised your hand. You've got a question.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, wonderful speakers. I really enjoyed listening to you all and insightful presentations. I have a question particularly for Dr. Samia. Yeah. So I think my major, I came in when you were at the middle of your presentation, and if I got one of your points clearly, pandemic created opportunities where we have this environment affected positively, and there's limited travels and all of that. And I think that is a positive side in terms of how we can move further from here. And you made some proposition which are very wonderful. So my concern regarding the proposition of how we network and how we, you know, can ensure inclusiveness while we are trying to also ensure that we don't travels and all that, but particularly for academic tourism, I have a concern that how does your model handle this kind of situation? Because I still believe that that has the opportunity of allowing universities growing or developing to also integrate with those that are already, you know, grown or have models to learn from and all that. We know that, of course, remote collaborations and all of that are possible, but how do your model or your proposition handle this kind of situation? Can we, in the future, say that we limit travels, we limit tourism, and therefore we still gain or have benefits in terms of what we can learn, what we can collaborate, what we can do internationally? I don't know if you get my question.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, I don't have a model because I think it's really important to consider different contexts differently. And especially in the partnership space, whoever, you know, your institution partners with, one needs to find models that fit that particular engagement. But generally, I think definitely not only from an equity point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. Academic tourism is one of the areas that really has to, that we have to let go of to some extent, because I give you an example of internationalization conferences, for example. Every year pre-pandemic, there was quite a calendar of events that happens, the biggest conference in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, in South Africa, in Australia, in the Asia Pacific region, etc. And some very few and very privileged internationalization colleagues can afford to go to all of those events. Colleagues in the Global South normally would only be able to travel to one or two of those in the year due to budget constraints. But since the pandemic, a number of these events have been put online and have been offered either entirely virtually or using hybrid models. And that is, I think, something that really we need to make sure continues. Because if all of these conferences go back to in-person models, then again, we're going to be sitting with an environment where large numbers of colleagues and institutions are excluded from participation. So I think that is one of the elements that is important. And there is also a renewed discussion now, especially when it comes to mobility from a climate action perspective. To say, from an environmental sustainability perspective, these kind of events, especially short-term academic travel, is not sustainable. And we have to come up with ideas of how we can continue to engage with each other without depending on that physical mobility practice. So I do think that now, and COVID has taught us that a lot is possible, and probably also that a lot more was possible to be changed in a very short period of time. We are talking about weeks and months in which we were entirely able to change the way that we worked and collaborate. And I think that's the important part for us, to continue doing that rather than wanting to go back to the way things were.
Thank you so much for the question. Again, I'll just try to recognize the fact that the technology has reduced that inequality gap in terms of access to conferences. You are able to actually attend a conference anywhere around the world now, provided it's virtual. Yes, again, look at us meeting now. I might have invited you to Greenwich or invited you to South Africa for us to meet, or invite you to India. But again, with this technology, it has really given us that opportunity. So my next question is to Dr. Otilia. Please, would you be able to help us, maybe give us maybe an insight into what we can do for the future? Because in your presentation, you mentioned the past, the present, and the future. So what do you think we can take away from here now? Like, yes, maybe see us as maybe education lecturers, practitioners. When we are thinking about the organization resilience, what can we do as we go to the future?
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. So, like I said, for our curriculum, we should have the past, the present, and the future embedded in our teaching and learning. So we assume that our future should actually be informed by our present and our past. So what we need for our future is, to think beyond what we can see, to present students with something beyond, can I say, their imagination. Like in one of my papers, I wrote something like presenting learners with activities like doomsday scenarios. Like we are thinking about doomsday and we present scenarios to learners so that they can actually imagine the future. So I was actually thinking something around that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. I like that express the doomsday. I was laughing. It's like that's something we need to recognize now. Another doomsday can come. So how are we prepared for that? But I just hope this is not in our own generation, please. We've had enough with COVID. Yes, but I think I like that illustration. Like it's just maybe like a simulation. It's not there, but we can plan for that. Thank you. I don't think there's any question, but I've got one question for Dr. Mavis, which is about your experience with lecturers who struggle with ICT. What do you, because when university is saying education must not stop, we must keep learning. What do you think we need to tell lecturers that struggles with technology, even when their university is telling them you must continue to teach? Dr. Mavis, any thought on that?
I think there is need to embrace the issues of technology. Like we highlighted in our chapter, we are saying COVID-19 has opened a portal through which we can envision higher education institutions under the fourth industrial revolution. So it means now that lecturers who were used to the old normal, while we're teaching face-to-face, this is an opportunity for lecturers to embrace technology, to be able to learn about all new online teaching methods, so that it can help them even beyond the lecturing in class. It can even help them even in attending the international conference we were talking about. It means that lecturers need to be training. There's need for refresher courses that will help them to embrace, to appreciate new methods of teaching and learning.
That's all right. Thank you so much. I think the key point I got there was the refresher. Like, yes, again, technology is changing that even you might think you know it, you still need to have that refresher. Thank you so much. I think we might move to the second session. I've seen Dr. Aria, and I think she has joined us, but I think we'll come back to that. So the second session will start with Dr. Ogini. I guess I must need to acknowledge Dr. Ogini. She was my, we were colleagues. Will I say colleague or classmates? Yes. I think she was my senior at the University of Lagos. So it's a pleasure to have her on board. I think she's the only person I've seen before. I think I saw her 20 years ago. Yes, yes. So Dr. Ogini, it's a pleasure to have you around for us to share your insights. Oh, please, I've seen your face. Yes, yes. So please, about 10 minutes, try to just reflect on your own. So I think you are coming in from architecture to see how perhaps there's need for us to redesign and to change the way we design our built environment for learning. So Dr. Ogini, you've got about 10 minutes for us to share, for you to share the insight. Thank you so much.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
I think it's coming up. You're saying you have been the screen, but I think it's only a black screen. Yes, we can see I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay. So I'll be talking on briefly on the value of space and architectural design in reimagining higher educational buildings post-pandemic. May I briefly say that we all are participants, or we all have been victims of the pandemic. We've all gone through it. We have all gone through the lockdown. We know what experiences we had and the impact it had on our children and on our students that we were involved, or our academic scholars. We all have the experience. And so now we have come out of, or we are still coming to terms with the after effects of the pandemic, even though it is still ongoing, but the effects, we are coming to terms with it. Life is moving on, whether we like it or not. So what do we do? What happens now with how we shape our spaces post-pandemic? I want to say that a new model of learning has been talked about for some time, but just as many other issues, COVID-19 has become a catalyst for progressing this evolution. The hybrid and the blended learning system have been resorted to in order to cope with the after effects of the pandemic. Now it raises a question: how do we shape these physical spaces, that is the use of our physical spaces post-pandemic, in a future for higher learning facilities one of the most important considerations will be how our spaces will be designed to meet the current need of education. So architects must design for dexterity. That is, architects must design for, flexibility. They must design for, growing, to meet the growing needs of our educational system. With human-centered approach, there'll be more concentration on human-centeredness, human-centered approach, and these developments will be what? Resilient. The new developments will be more resilient than what we had in the past. Yes, this means that in near term, our university campus designs will be a hybrid of our familiar traditional campuses and new spaces for different uses. That is, campus designs now will be repurposed to suit the hybrid blended learning system. So we are going to have more of what facilities that will support the blended learning system. So the new educational facilities will be designed with better versatility. They'll be more flexible. When you say flexible, it means that they can adapt to whatever needs. Spaces can change, they can morph to become, depending upon the needs or the desire at that time, spaces will be able to change. They'll be more flexible to be able to change to needs that are arising at that moment. And they will accommodate all types of uses. That is multifunctional spaces. That's how spaces will become. And this will allow them to be able to adapt and to incorporate modern technology. They'll be incorporating more modern technology. And so you have more breakout spaces that will allow students to collaborate, but likely in smaller groups, not in large groups as we had in the past. We know that for developing countries, one of our problems is that our spaces, our classrooms are overpopulated. But now we are going to have them breaking out into smaller groups. There will also be greater synergy with synergy of school with commercial partnerships. That is, universities now will be having more synergy with commercial partnerships, such that there will be more research and development, and with such that there will be relocation of offices to campus spaces. That is, there will be work and learn spaces, learn and working spaces coming up now. And then we begin to see more startup incubators, service office spaces being developed on the campus. This will be made more available for people in the business community. So what we'll see more of is offices where a lot of research are being carried out and being brought to life even within the campus environment. There are so many possibilities for university campus designs, so many possibilities. The questions will now be how to develop a campus that is both versatile and future-proofed. And the only way we can do this is through digital engineering. That is, the design is versatile, but also future-proofed. And this can be done through digital engineering. Students largely prefer smaller groups because when you have larger classrooms, you have the golden seats and you have the shadow seats. The golden seats are the ones that are in front, and the shadow seats are the ones that are behind or at the side that don't get to see the boards or interactive boards, easily. So, but with smaller groups, you have more collaboration, more synergy between the students and the lecturers. And so we can avoid that problem with having your seats either too far from the class to the teacher or not. And then we will not have, we do not expect to have so many physical lecture theaters that carry massive number of students. Since now we can deliver lectures via Zoom platforms and other such platforms, they will be using less of the theaters and having more smaller groups, hybrid learning classes, smaller groups and with a lot of students online. So what is the state of emerging societies? They have poor access to technology. We all know that because many of us here are from emerging economies. we see that we have poor access to technology. This limits the students' ability, you understand, or access to technology, to IT, to data and all that. So this further supports the debate for the need of physical teaching spaces, because we have issues with access, technology and infrastructure, you know, getting the students getting access to these things, you know, without that having inequalities. Yes, so because of that, this supports the need for the physical spaces. So the question is, will universities need to build more classrooms and lecture theaters as the educational system now is becoming more virtual or hybrid? Well, because of high classroom density, it is also because of high classroom density being a feature of developing economies, we might find out that the effectiveness of these conventional lecture spaces, the effectiveness, the reduction in their effectiveness will now raise the need for fewer investments in classrooms and lecture theaters. Not that they will not be in use, but there will be fewer investments in them. Rather, there will be more money invested in IT infrastructure and adapting existing classrooms to suit the hybrid system. So that will be more of, you know, there'll be more of, what's the word now? When you have to rehabilitate spaces, more of rehabilitation of spaces with more IT functions and infrastructure, rather than more building of theaters and lecture spaces. So the developments during the pandemic have rendered online learning a necessity and not an option. So based on this diversity of preferences of online learning between different age groups, that is, for the younger age groups, they prefer to have physical learning, and while the older age groups prefer to go online. So because of this, we'll find out that for practical, for the older learning people, we can have them off the physical learning, and they can spread out into the spaces. Hello? Hello? Am I still audible?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay. So this same approach will also accommodate students taking practical courses, which are limited to face-to-face classes. That is, when we cannot have some students off physical classes, we cannot have more spread with those that need to have those that need to have practical courses and which need to be face-to-face with their teachers. So that reduces the classroom density and allows there to be more space for those that need to, you know, practical classrooms or practical teaching. So we all know the challenges with the hybrid learning already. The challenges are the poor network connections, the poor power challenges, electricity challenges, the cost of data for students and all, and the lecturers' e-learning skill deficiency. These are all challenges with the hybrid learning, but we have to overcome these challenges because we can only move forward, like all my speakers have been saying, that there's no going back to the traditional learning systems. So despite these challenges with virtual learning, we still need to move forward and find ways of getting over these hiccups and still getting on with our hybrid learning systems. So in summary, the educational system is evolving, and so will the structures that support them. Developing countries will have it much more difficult to adapt. Like all other technologies, they will eventually adopt these new systems and infrastructure. New technology will be more digitalized and more IT-based. We will see more IT infrastructure than traditional buildings in the near future. School buildings will still be in use, however, hybrid technology infused. So with that, I want to say I've given my presentation a wrap. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. I guess one key point I'm taking away from this is the need to reduce the investment of building large lecture theaters, and we use that to actually invest more in digital infrastructures. So thank you so much. We'll come back to you if you have any question. So the next speaker will be Suraj from MICA in India. So please, Suraj, the floor is yours in 10 minutes, please, because we are mindful of the time.
Sure. May I quickly share the screen?
Yes, you can. Yes.
So I will be talking about understanding students' engagement. As all my previous speakers have been discussing, the lack of infrastructure, the challenges around technology that especially are heightened in emerging economies. So I'll quickly move on to the next slide. So one of the most important thing was the closure of different educational institutions carried a substantial amount of economic losses, but it also affected the vulnerable and the marginalized. And these issues are heightened in emerging economies. And even if there are a lot of discussion surrounding how the transition to online has been successful or well accepted, but we have to remember that the context. They have primarily catered to the educated, urban, or the elite section of the population. So the issues such as social exclusion, access divide, digital divide still remains. So being that as a starting point, one thing that we all are now very familiar is the word Zoom. So aptly titled, the thing that came to my mind while writing the chapter, are we zooming past the new normal? Because Zoom has become a central part of our life. And one transition, as Professor Mogaji also mentioned, institutions moved to online platform because they had to continue the form of education, because they could not stop even when the pandemic hit. So in an attempt to move towards the online, institutions in their own way managed their own certain platforms, started from WebEx, then Zoom and Google Meet. But that is how we evolved. And there are a lot of challenges for learners. And as all my previous speakers mentioned, that one of the characteristics of emerging economy is the infrastructure and IT issues. But more than that, we share a space with other family members. The issue of distraction, motivation, to have the discipline to work in isolation, the lack of accountability if we are doing in remote learning, and the increased screen time, and the now also well-researched topic of the Zoom fatigue. So we are all aware of all these challenges. Given these challenges, how can we work towards improving student engagement? And one of the also important areas is an emotional support for the learners. So what was interesting about this chapter is I got an opportunity to connect different strands of literature and bring together what is student engagement. Often it is defined as the individual's cognitive capacity, their ability to focus. But one thing they're also missing is the course design, the role of instructors, the socio-cultural context. That is the very crux of this book that is proposed, to understand various nuances of emerging economies and the challenges. And to understand the context as a background is essential to understanding student engagement. And as we already discussed, the issues of infrastructure and resources are unevenly distributed. There are always, like the previous speaker mentioned, students in the front bench and the last bench, but now that is not there. Students are being pushed back. The minorities and the vulnerables may or may not get that level of attention or ability to be in the class. How would we work through that? These are a few of the challenges of student engagement. So borrowing from Boruk's ACE framework, that is Adolescent Community of Engagement framework, the chapter proposes a stakeholders perspective to understanding student engagement. So who are these stakeholders? These are educational institutions, instructors, and the major stakeholders, the students themselves. So during the pandemic, what we realized, it is not one entity or a stakeholder that can fuel everything. It is only when they come together, share the responsibilities, and have a problem-solving orientation, only then we can address the multitude of challenges that we are facing. So administration, leadership, these all play a huge role. And one of the interesting things is, although we have moved to online learning, we have to remember these courses were primarily designed for offline classroom teaching. So there are a lot of gaps that needs to be addressed. As previous speakers mentioned, various pedagogical improvements can be done to understand training for both the learners and the instructors, because even they are new to all these edtech platforms and so on. So one of the last point is, what universities were trying to do is simply replicate what they were doing in the class, standing in front of the class and trying to broadcast or give out information that may not work in online, because it is not about just dissemination of information. It is about trying to create a rapport, having some kind of connection with the students. Only then we can achieve some level of engagement and positive learning outcomes. So we have to also question what is the residual legacy of the pandemic on higher education. I think before the pandemic, we were already there regarding edtech platforms and slow adoption, but it was not widely accepted. There are a lot of institutions with infrastructure challenges and the financial challenges. Only the top leading institutions have been able to balance the offline and online. So what this pandemic did is give us an opportunity to reevaluate and reinvent what are the processes happening in an institution. Maybe investing in platforms that can further business opportunities, moving towards hybrid platform, maybe location agnostic platforms, completely online programs, and also a great opportunity for institutions to leverage by collaborating with leading edtech platforms to offer courses to working professionals. So we've seen the great opportunity the pandemic has provided us with. So unlike others, I don't have a conclusion, but I have a lot of questions, because what the pandemic did to all of us is just question ourselves, our practices, what is happening around. And so we have to ask ourselves, how successful have we been in addressing the digital divide, especially in emerging economies like India? We've been talking about a lot of success stories of leading schools, but what about the underprivileged? What about non-metro cities or social economic background who are lagging behind? And what is the future of gig economy and edtech? Would education be moved towards something known as the contractual instructors? Would we be working as an independent teaching entity, if I'm not right? Because of these are very interesting questions that has the pandemic has presented us with. And last, what can universities make to do with this learning, where it is simply not just like a YouTube service, you're streaming your professor. So it is more than that. It is more than just viewing a video and streaming knowledge and recording technology. What more can we do? What more certain things can be incorporated that we achieve some level of engagement and positive student outcomes, which is always the key for educators. So I think I am done. Thank you. May I stop sharing?
That's all right. You can stop sharing. You can stop sharing. Yes. Thank you so much, Suraj. This is my first time of listening to you. And like I said, I've not seen you before, but I've only seen your hard work. But again, thank you so much for those insights. I like the way that two things. Number one, you went a different direction by sharing the student experience. I think that's very, very important. Most of us has talked about maybe the practitioners, I think maybe from Samia to the lecturers' experience, but you came in from a student perspective, which is very good. And also, I think I will want to align with your own idea, which I would describe as Uberization of higher education.
Yes.
This is where you are treating education like Uber, whereby you can stream your lecturer, you can give your lecturer 5-star or tell him, Emmanuel, I'm giving you 1 star. I don't like your screen for today. Again, how does that happen? So somebody else will see my rating and say, wow, Emmanuel is 5 star. Then I need to go and study under Emmanuel. So again, that is what technology has turned us to, and also streaming it. So I might be in UK, I might be studying my BS in Harvard. Again, that's something that is important. Thank you so much. I think we therefore continue with Imani. Yes, Imani Sharma. I've had the opportunity of working with Imani before. Like, yes, this is like a disclaimer. Yes, it's been a pleasure working with her, but I will allow her to have the floor now to share with us our own insights. Thank you so much, Imani. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor. So before I go ahead, can I please share my screen?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, go on.
So I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Oh, yes, we can see it. I'm sure this is in 10 minutes. It's yes.
Yes, it's
thank
very
you.
short. All right. So thank you once again, everyone, for your time. And I think the speakers who have come before me have set the floor and given an understanding, and especially what Suraj has discussed has set the mood for what exactly partnerships and what stakeholder engagement in higher education looks like. So in this book, which talks about reimagining the educational futures, I have 2 contributions. So my first chapter here talks about mapping the global edtech revolution during the pandemic, which talks about from moving the shift from determinism to solutionism. So I think I would just build upon what Suraj just mentioned about how technology has been put as a centerpiece and how it has been taken to an advantage for using for teaching and learning without even at times understanding what are the challenges that lie. And specifically that when we talk about developing nations where there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of issues, it becomes all the more important to focus on these nuances of technology and their integration into higher education. So here the chapter lays down how we have taken a shift from determinism to solutionism, where we ourselves as society, as stakeholders in higher education, see all the possible opportunities that technology and technology-oriented platforms and the edtech platforms that we all often talk about have to offer. So the chapter here specifically talks about 3 C's, which is creativity, cost, and the crisis management. So like many of us talked about how we're still handling the situation in our countries, how we're still undergoing a lot of challenges because of the ongoing wave of the pandemic. Crisis management has become an important part of it. So when we talk about creativity, the edtech companies and the higher education institutions have given their fair share of play in making all possible changes during the pandemic. And the sudden shift that we all underwent was one of the greatest examples of how creativity was used to its maximum to ensure that the teaching and learning was happening. And of course, there were certain outcomes which were both positive and negative. And one of them being like they mentioned about Uberization of higher education, where everything became well-timed and everything became to be rated and understood and to be given a feedback. But then there were other sets of creativity where smart learning environments were created, where strategic partnerships were held between the edtech platforms which were ready to offer solutions. And since the chapter specifically draws data from India, it talks about how edtech became a huge market, which was an existing market in India. But then during the pandemic, there was a propulsion of their growth. There was an ignition for these startups which were there, and they became a huge thing in the market, and especially for higher education, if we talk about. And at the same time, there was the introduction of the new education policy in India, which was actually revived after over more than 30 years, which talked about specific technology integration. So creativity was used, and creativity is still being used to ensure that technology is rightly integrated into learning practices. The second thing we also talked about in the chapter is about cost. So cost was an important factor because in developing nations, higher education is seen as an investment. It is an investment for your future, for the life of an individual, which they earn in returns in the future. So these edtech platforms, the strategic partnerships that we have been talking about, devised new cost plans where subscription-based models, premium-based models, and even there were free models where no cost was charged for learning. Of course, there were different segments of customers of users, or I should say learners, which were targeted, but cost became an important aspect. Cost also became an important aspect when higher education institutions collaborated with edtech platforms and were now able to offer global courses. So they were able to get global faculties on board, and the students did not have to pay as much as of the amount, but within a limited amount of time, or even at times with free models of their teaching and learning, they were able to enroll for the courses and learn certain programs. The third thing that the chapter focuses is about crisis management. So definitely, whenever we are talking about technology, whenever we are talking about a revolution, we cannot oversight the fact that crisis management was done during this time, because many of the institutions still in our country have faced the challenge to adopt the new changes. So these platforms, these edtech platforms actually kind of helped them by providing them the right software support, by providing them the right platform services, which then they could leverage and use for teaching and learning practices in their campuses. So the overview of the chapter talks about this, but then the chapter also takes a neutral stance where it talks about how solutionism has become a mindset, that technology can give every solution, which is not right in every case. So like Suraj was rightly mentioning, the questions of digital divide, the questions of having access to information are still a challenge in many of the countries, including India. So that's how the chapter navigates from talking about the whole global revolution of the edtech, but also highlighting certain challenges which persist and which we need to address. So that's the first chapter that we have contributed. And the second chapter I have that is in contribution with my other co-authors who have been mentioned over here. So I would like to thank them and acknowledge them. And so the chapter is a more futuristic chapter. So it's an advancement of the previous chapter, and it's a more futuristic chapter which talks about AI adoption in universities. So it talks about the various prospects, the challenges, the recommendations which are possible, and we try to integrate it with the theory of human capital. So we talk about how AI adoption for teaching and learning, how AI integration into teaching and learning practices in higher education can contribute to human capital. And then we talk about the three spheres. We keep higher education, we keep the economic activities that happen in our countries, the artificial intelligence into one segment. And then we talk about how different stakeholders, including the students, faculties, administrators, and external stakeholders can undertake AI-based learning opportunities and can also move towards the direction of equitable opportunities. So again, it's a very dilemmatic proposition to pose over here, that AI can actually solve all the challenges of digital divide, but the chapter gives certain recommendations where AI can be used in promoting an equitable system of higher education where everybody could have opportunities. Then we also talk about how artificial intelligence and economic activities in various countries overlap, and there's a huge discussion around big data. There's a discussion around digitization, automation of teaching and learning practices, the challenges that persist. So the chapter also encaptures all the challenges which are there, the possible issues which can stop the process, which can hinder the process of AI adoption in higher education. And then it also specifically talks about how AI in artificial intelligence in education can drive a system of learning by supplementing the resources of teaching and learning which are there, trying to reduce inequality, so by opening up more educational opportunities, trying to bridge the digital divide. So not 100% bridging the digital divide, because AI in itself is more of an elite technological access that we all need. So yes, moving a steps towards it, and then trying to give supportive opportunities for teaching and learning. But then the chapter also highlights the various challenges which talk about the need for right digital infrastructure, the need for advanced resources and training. So the faculty, the students need to be trained, the mindset, the whole value system of higher education will have to evolve to adopt AI in the universities for teaching and learning. And then there's the aspect of policy making, which we touch upon, and we talk about how the various external stakeholders, the bureaucrats, the policymakers can contribute in making more robust education systems where AI can also be integrated. So it's more of a futuristic chapter which talks about how future will demand for smart learning environments. It will demand for more humanistic systems, yet we'll talk about more technological advancements where individuals will be guiding others in adopting those technologies. So that's the 2 chapters that we talk about over here, and that's our contribution. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And again, like I said, I've worked with you and it's always a pleasure. I guess the key point I want to take is actually the EdTech. I think that we also go with this previous speaker about this role of Zoom and EdTech. I think that's actually something we need to consider. But let's go on. I think we come back to that if there's any question. I think we've got Dr. Nesto Asiama. Yes, she is from University of Essex. Again, I remember my first encounter with him when we had the peer review. It was very, very supportive, very well detailed, and he provided some good feedback about the chapter. So it's a pleasure to have him on board to actually share his insights with us. Dr. Nestor, are you here with us?
Yes,
I've
please,
seen
I'm
you.
Here. Yes, I'm here.
Yes, yes. So please, have you got a slide? Again, this is not compulsory, but again, it's...
Yes, I've got some slides, but considering my colleagues who presented earlier, I would want to do it informal. So let me just talk through the slides.
Okay, that's all right.
Yes. Okay. So good afternoon, colleagues from around the world. It's a privilege to have this platform to present my ideas. And I started learning about this COVID-19 and I think the way forward since the opportunity was announced for us to put together some chapters for the book. So my contributions to the book were based on an initial study I led at the Africa Center for Epidemiology, where I served as an executive director for some time before joining the University of Essex. And in that study, we investigated changes in behaviors due to social distancing measures taken by universities, by African governments and others. So we realized that behaviors change. We heard a lot about domestic violence. We heard a lot about smoking, people consuming drugs because they wanted to protect themselves from COVID. And so we wanted to understand these behaviors. After that project, after leading that project, I realized that something was peculiar to the sample of academics around Africa, because we hold a WhatsApp group which has academics from at least 11 African countries. And we realized that on a daily basis, they posted comments, they're talking about stress, how they had to teach online, how they were prevented from going out to exercise and all that. So we realized that a lot of people were in prison, so to say. And so we wanted to understand that further. So we initiated this project to understand how job components of academics would affect physical activity and what the implications for the future would be. So again, I brought together a group of researchers from some African countries, including Kenya and Nigeria and Botswana, to investigate how job components, particularly research, student assessment, online teaching, and on-site teaching correlate with physical activity. So at the end of the study, I have just 5 key lessons that I want to share with you. And I think the book is there. The limitations, the methodology that we adopted could be seen in the book. So the first key lesson is the fact that academics have to live what they know, teach, and research. The academics have to live what they know, teach, and research. I'm saying this because we've realized that academics around the world do research about physical activity and exercise. Of course, the WHO has done a lot of, let me say, consultation and implemented programs to improve physical activity around the world just to protect health. And these studies and interventions were led by academics, and academics teach about physical activity a lot in the classroom. You would often hear them say, oh, at least when you sit down for 30 minutes, you should be able to stand up to exercise for some time before continuing what you're doing. So you shouldn't sit down for too long. And I do that a lot because I teach preventive medicine, and my interest is in physical activity. But the problem is that the irony of that is that academics don't exercise often. And a lot of literatures I've looked at indicate that academics are most vulnerable to physical inactivity or sedentary behavior. That is sitting for too long, because we are workaholics. We work a lot. We never want to stop working. And so we are vulnerable to what? Physical inactivity, which is so bad. So why do we do a lot of research on physical activity, yet we don't want to exercise? So the first lesson from the chapter is that we should live what we research, teach, and know about physical activity. And the second finding or lesson from the chapter is that we have to do a lot of physical activity to compensate for occupational sitting. Occupational sitting is sitting too much, or let's say sitting for at least 30 minutes at a time. And academics are fond of that. We are well known for sitting too much because we sit to do research, we sit to write lesson notes, we sit to do desk research, literature reviews and all that. And though we are contributing to health in different ways, of course, if you are an academic, yet you don't do physical activity, it means you're not benefiting from what you teach, because even those of us who are not in the health domain still teach students to be healthy. So that is why we need to live what we teach students. So we need to do a lot of exercise so that we can compensate for the sitting hours that we do, because we can't avoid sitting as academics. And the most interesting finding from the chapter is that academics who work or live on campus compared to those who live off campus, okay, are more active. So for example, if you have your apartment or residence on campus, you are more active than your colleague who is off campus. In Africa, this is not generic to other developed countries. And that is the case because in Africa, university campuses are more workable. If they are more workable, it means that they provide essential services, they have a lot of green space, and that is why I like the idea that our sister presented earlier about architectural design. Okay, I will be asking her a couple of questions on that because I'm very interested in campus design. And so university campuses in Africa are more workable than the traditional neighborhoods where people live. So if you're on campus, you have access to services and green spaces. And that is why those who live on campus are more active than their colleagues who are off campus. And so one of the recommendations is that universities should start thinking about how to help or support their workers or academics to live on campus. Our study revealed that just about 16% of academics, okay, are given the opportunity to live on campus. So over 80% are off campus. That means that 80% will not benefit from what? The workability of their campuses, which is bad. That is some kind of inequality that we need to avoid. And so the final lesson is that we need to intensify the health education for academics. This sounds strange because these learned colleagues, they teach about health, they talk about physical activity, they talk about things that people should do to improve humanity, yet they don't practice what they teach. So we have come back to the question of, is it possible for academics to listen to programs or to hear to programs that are designed to influence their health behaviors? A lot of academics would say, oh, I know about that already. I know that physical activity is good for me, but I don't think I have time for it. And so we need to move beyond this status quo and ensure that academics are influenced in a positive direction to ensure that they take responsibility for their health. Because if you look at the literature, academics don't enjoy the best health because of workaholism, because of physical inactivity, And you realize that many of them work without really enjoying the fruit of their labor in old age, because they accumulate a lot of health risk, and in older age, they face a lot of this risk, or most of these risks materialize, and in fact, it takes a lot of time of ill health, which is not good for us. So, learned colleagues, this is what I can say about my chapter. You can find a lot from the chapter, and it's such a huge privilege to be part of this book and this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nesto. Yes, you've challenged us. I have to stand up now. Yes, I've been sitting there for the past, so this is 4:46. So I've been sitting for the past 1 hour, 46 minutes. So I had to stand up. Thank you so much. Again, that is a practical implication of your research. So yes, I think that has started. Thank you so much. I'm sure we come back to you for if there's any questions. Then lastly, but not the least, let me invite Dr. Daniela. I think she's from Ecuador, which is actually South America. I'm sure perhaps the different time zones, but notwithstanding, please, the floor is yours, Dr. Daniela. In about 10 minutes, please, because of our time, please just give us your insight about reimagining higher education in developing countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. Well, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can, everybody can see. Well, we conduct our research in different countries, such as Spain, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Ecuador. You know that the pandemic changed everyone's life. The situation caused by this global crisis has led university to make abrupt and immediate change to continue training their students virtually, in virtual ways. And some Latin university has urgently adapted their infrastructure so that both professor and student can continue their training efficiently. That is why the technology plays an active role in education life, and that it is inclusive to generate knowledge in the formation of participatory citizenship. We want to show all this change and what the abrupt change to virtually means for professors and students. In our the data collected in this research was obtained through interviews and survey of professors for different areas in the universities in the mentioned countries. At the start of class in 2012, 2020, they tested and implemented several new tools, as well as new strategies. The quantitative data was collected through a survey consisting of 26 questions distributed in different blocks. The first blocks focus on multiple choices questions like general issues or ENH, employment status, and teaching times. The second block was made up for 6 questions based on their knowledge of development of virtual class that we thought that was important. So teaching reception by the student, technical problems encountered by both teacher and students, tool use, experience, and challenge of the online training. And finally, in the last block, 6 questions were asked about strategies, planning of teaching, and the level of knowledge acquired in teaching. 3 questions were asked about acting breaks, activity, class section. 3 questions were asked about evaluation, performance, and participation. And finally, 4 questions were asked about the effort to prepare and manage online training and the increase in virtual classes, as well as the use of mixed models and the paradigm change. Among the most memorable results of the survey we found was only 49% of the professors have received training on online teaching pre-pandemic. 64% of the faculty members has not given an online class pre-pandemic. 65% of the teachers consider that the tools and methodology provided by the university were adequate. 86% of the professors reported they have to make an extra effort to prepare for online classes. 93% of the teacher consider post-pandemic online teaching as a positive experience. The preliminary study reveals that most teachers has not had infrastructure problems when teaching their classes. Although they have had connectivity problems, all of us has here, a key aspect for online courses, obviously, considering that the teacher has been very committed and that they have tried to adapt to the new circumstances quickly and with understanding professionalism, we believe that there have been a very significant effort and the teachers themselves are aware of their gaps in knowledge about the tools for creating multimedia and interactive context. Universities have had to adapt even more than teachers and students. This study showed that not all universities were prepared for change, but they adapt. They started marathon training session, reuse existing instruments until they met expectations. University will change teaching based on this, including a percentage of virtual education for life in their curricula. This data can give us a clear idea of what the education was like in Latin countries and how it could evolve. The common denominator in many cases is that teachers do not only require infrastructure in their homes to do their work better. This is something that can we implement quickly. The major problem that has arisen in the pandemic is not the need for infrastructure, but rather the need to propose a change in the methodology for carrying out the work and in less than ideal condition. We found that classroom flipping goes beyond speaking present, but require a mix of learning tools for better engagement. Higher education providers are expected to keep working through our adaptive learning, making e-learning content mobile. Last-wise, instructional design should encompass a variety of multimedia resources. Lecture should create a supported learning environment, providing ongoing feedbacks. A specific training is required in the development of these teaching methodologies for online training, and the development of material and content now is fully multimedia and interactive space. All this without knowing how to develop development and with what tools we can adapt to the content. Today, technology plays an essential role in active learning with connectivity. Through effort have been made to improve multinational design from the student. We acknowledge some limitations. Therefore, the result should be interpreted in the context of limitation. First, this is a descriptive study to give an overview of preparedness and teacher effort. Further study should aim to carry out other statistical analysis to understand better the difference across the country and any different significant correlation. Second, the result only present insight from the teacher. The opinion of the student only on this online learning parameter have not been surveyed for us. And further study can examine the student experience about how their online learning have evolved in the wake of the pandemic. And third, in the future, we hope to conduct another surveys to contrast the data collected so far and learn how the entire educational system in the Spanish-speaking university can change during and after COVID-19. All the student systems have to change and adapt to the new needs for teacher and student for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time and for your contribution. I think what I enjoyed more about your presentation was the fact that it was multi-country. like you got insight from different countries. And also I think it aligns well with findings of Dr. Mavis, even though it is Zimbabwe, but also we recognize that. So thank you so much for all the presenters. It's been a pleasure. Yes, I guess I want to have like a closing remark, our closing questions for all the speakers. So I think the point is so please, I'm going back to Dr. Samia. So starting from the very top, thank you so much for being with us right from the beginning. I hope you've had time to stand up and to walk your leg. Yes, Dr. Nestor told us we should not sit too long. So please, I just want one closing remark. Just one closing remark. You will choose a stakeholder and you will tell us what you think they should take away from this. So please, each speaker, I'll be coming to you from Dr. Samia to Dr. Otilia, Dr. Ariana, then Dr. Mavis, Dr. Yemi, Suraj, Imani, and Dr. Nesto. We have different stakeholders with higher education, especially we've seen from students, from lecturers, from EdTech. So please, one stakeholder, one key point for them. So in closing remark, this is about 4 more minutes. So one stakeholder, maybe a student, what should a student do? A lecturer, what should the lecturer do? A vice chancellor, what should they do? So Dr. Samia, I will come to you. Give us one stakeholders and one closing point for them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. What an interesting challenge. I think I'm going to go with a group that you didn't mention. I would like to pose a challenge to funders, because you will be aware that partnerships often depend on the institution's ability to find funding to do whatever activity it is that they want to do. And so I think it's important that we enter into a dialogue and conversation with funding organizations and bodies that facilitate partnerships to really come up with mechanisms and instruments that facilitate the work that we need to do, which, for example, needs to focus on issues of inclusion and social justice, as we touched on today from so many different perspectives. So I think that's an important advocacy task for everyone who works in higher education. And that is, I think, then my parting message to you. Thanks.
I love that. Thank you so much for parting message. I love, yes. Thank you. I didn't mention that, but that is why we have this roundtable. We can't all be talking about students and lecturers. Somebody must mention something different. I hope somebody will mention something for parents, because I think that's something we also need to recognize that, yes, if I live in a 1-bedroom flat, I have one computer in my house, how do I manage my children? So hopefully we've got about 8 speakers. Let's see if somebody will mention about parents. So Dr. Otilia, the floor is yours. One stakeholder, one message, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emmanuel. I would like to thank the editors of this book. You know, I'm an editor who is about to publish a book, and I know how difficult it is to be chasing people and, you know, trying to put things together. So I would like to thank you, Emmanuel, and your 4 co-editors. You are doing a great job, and this is not my first chapter for your books. I think it's the 2nd one. So thank you very much for that. And I would also like to talk about one of Dr. Daniela's findings, which says 93% considered post-pandemic online teaching as a positive experience. That gives me a lot of thinking on how that is going to work, and how can we envisage a kind of education system which we talk about positive experience only, without, you know, any barriers around it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to get one stakeholder from you. So who is that stakeholder that you want to give your closing remark? Okay, I hope you understand my question. So, okay, let's leave that. Let's leave that.
No,
let me rephrase it. So Dr. Samia told us, as in try to reach out to partners and funders. So Dr. Otilia, do you have a stakeholder in your university settings that you want to give a closing remark?
Maybe if I can talk about, you know, people who fund projects around equality and social justice within universities, because in Africa, we have problems of, you know, the curriculum being considered a middle class curriculum, and we're trying to move away from that to make it, you know, accommodate everyone in education. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. I'm sure, Dr. Samia, this is not a question for you, but I'm sure you know there's a difference between funders and partners. I won't allow you to spend so much time on that, but please, I don't just want to mix them together. So we've got the partners, the funders. Okay, so I think next on my list is Dr. Ariana. So Dr. Ariana, give me one stakeholder, like, yes, it could be parent, it could be student, it could be technology developer, it could be vice chancellors. Give me one stakeholder and what would be your closing remark, your parting message, if I may use that word.
I think partners, because this chapter was work from so many and so different persons from different countries. We gained so much inputs and outputs from these different countries, but we noticed that we have some similarities. We are Latins and we have come like the same thing and the same problems, and it was not new, but I'm not strange to see the same the environment attitude in students and professors in Spain, in Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador. We are far from each other, but we are Latins. I don't know, I think they're in our groups.
That's, yes, thank you so much. At least we've got funders. So now let me ask Dr. Mavis. I hope you understand the question and you know what is going on. So one stakeholders and a parting remark. Oh God, I keep saying a parting. Dr. Samia, help me with that word. A parting, a closing remark.
A parting message is what I called it.
Yes, a parting message. So like as we finish, as we part, give me one stakeholder and then what is the parting message?
Okay, Emmanuel. I think my message is for national governments from the global south. My main message is that they should invest in financing infrastructure, online infrastructure to support educators in learning. I think from what has been presented, we realize that we have challenges of the economy in the global south. So we should do away with that, the assumption that higher tertiary education institutions are middle class and they can support online teaching. Like the nation government should have a budget specifically for online infrastructure for higher and tertiary education institutions. They should do away with that assumption, just assuming that higher and tertiary education teachers and learners can do online teaching and learning.
That's all right. Thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Yemi, your stakeholder and your parting remark, your parting message.
My parting remark is to the government.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that COVID was an eye-opener, revealing to us our weaknesses in every sector of the economy, especially in education. So my parting remark is that the government needs to invest as quick as possible in infrastructure. Yes, to invest in infrastructure to prepare us to be resilient, because COVID is just one of the pandemics, many that will probably come in the future. So we need to begin to brace up to the challenges as they come and learn from them and then get prepared for the next one. So I would say that the government, yes, should invest. Yes, there will be another one. There will be another one.
Okay. I hope not in my generation anyway, but yes, okay. We have to learn. So Raj, please, what's your stakeholder and your closing remark, please?
Okay, the stakeholder I'd like to mention is the institution itself, but in particular the leadership. In such tough times of uncertainty, and the leadership is who makes the decision where to allocate resources, how to take care of learners and teachers. We've actually forgotten that professors were also faced with so many difficulties in day-to-day operations during the pandemic. Just like the students, they are also doing their everyday lives from home. So I think as an institution, because the government interference may be limited, but it's the leadership that can make the difference by providing certain infrastructure support, emotional support, that can make a difference in a student's life as well as the faculty. So I think leadership and an institution plays a critical role.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Ladies, we've got institutional leaders, Professor Varsha. I'm sure you'll be taking some message back. Yes. Okay. So Imani, a stakeholder and a parting message.
So Professor, the stakeholder that I choose is the students themselves. So because we live in a technologically driven era and students are an important stakeholder, we have like higher education is a field where you cannot hold somebody else accountable for your actions. So when you have access to resources, when you have technological options, when you have n number of courses available, you should as a student take it as a responsibility to pick a course that will enhance your skills, that will help you survive in the future, not just in the job market perspective, but also in the perspective of lifelong learning. The whole phenomena of lifelong learning should be understood by the students as an important one, and should not, the students should not play this blame game of blaming the institutions or any other body for their placements or for any other activity. You should yourself become accountable for your actions and take your decisions smartly and decide what you want your future to be. So students are my primary stakeholders. For them, I have this message.
That's all right. Thank you so much. Even your professor is clapping for you. Thank you so much. That sounds like a student union political speech. Like, yes, it's time. Okay. Dr. Nesto, yes. What's your stakeholder and a parting message, please?
Okay, thank you very much. I mentioned a number of stakeholders in my chapter, but I would focus on us, academics.
Okay.
The reason being that we are the best to control our health. Okay, and post-COVID-19, we'll be doing a lot of sitting, teaching online, and doing some other stuff. And workaholism is going to increase. We can't avoid that. And that is why we need to be responsible for our health. And you might find it interesting to know that the magic is all about standing every 30 minutes, just standing. Okay. And there is something we call micro exercise. So if you see if I do this, that is micro exercise.
Okay.
So you can see my Maxwell's pulling micro exercise. And then maybe after another 30 minutes, I stand up and sit down. That is micro exercise. You don't need to run about, jogging and all that. So that is my message.
Wow. Thank you so much for the challenge. I've really enjoyed this because it's quite practical. Everybody can take something away from this. So thank you so much. Before I invite Dr. Lepa, who is the Vice President of SEMRI, to give us a closing remark. Dr. Varsha, any stakeholder, any party message? Like, let me bring it back to you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your insights. It's quite exciting, and I could see the follow-up book already while the discussions are happening. So thank you for that. Well, my stakeholder would be the EdTech company, Emmanuel, and my message would be that as we keep discussing about human technology connect, that has to be consistent. I think we can't get away from saying that there is no human connect in the higher education. So that would be my, message, which I would like to convey, primarily coming from the developing countries.
That's all right. Thank you so much for that. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm sure we look forward to more work relationship together. Thank you so much for everybody. We spent about 2 hours. I can't imagine the last time I sat for a 2 hours Zoom, but I guess maybe because different perspectives are coming in. Thank you so much from different parts of the world. Dr. Samia, it's been a pleasure. Dr. Otilia again from South Africa. Dr. Mavis from Zimbabwe. Dr. Ariana from Ecuador. You've got Suraj again. Imani from India. Thank you so much. I've also got Nesto. Thank you. Ghana, Essex. I really appreciate that. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Dr. Yemi, yes, it's been a pleasure having you around. So Dr. Lekma, are you here with us to just give a closing remark about SEMRI and for us to bring this to an end? Okay. I can't see, maybe he's also having a technical problem. So thank you so much for Dr. Solomon. Are you here also? Dr. Solomon is the Chairman Board of Trustee for SEMRI. I don't know if he's also here to give a closing remark. Okay. Yes, I would not want to keep you much beyond your time. So SEMRI, it's a non-governmental, a non-profit research organization that looks into promote innovation research in Africa and also extend it to other developing countries. We recognize the fact that it is a different ball game when it comes to Africa and when it comes to our challenges. So SEMRI comes together with different background, with different insight for us to address this issue. So today, this month, so every month we want to be having like our roundtable discussion to find issues that are important to Africans and also perhaps to other developing countries. So this month has been about education, whereby we recognize the impact of the COVID pandemic on higher education. And again, thank you so much for those that contributed. Next one is in May 26th. If you can join us, that will be around transportation and for us to explore transportation in Africa and to really find out how, because again, COVID has affected transportation. So SEMRI just brings a lot of ideas together, and today has been about education. So thank you so much for everybody that has joined us from different parts of the world. Kitan, I just have to make a reference. Thank you so much. You've been very engaging. You've switched on your camera. I've seen you engage with different presentations. Thank you so much, Pat Sanjay again. I'm sure it's been a pleasure for you to come on board and for you to listen to this. I hope you've taken something away from this. So thank you so much. It's been a 2 hours stretch. So please, with the closing remark of Dr. Nesto, please go and stretch your leg, go and do your exercise and enjoy the rest of your day. I hope next time we call on you, will you answer us? Thank you so much. And please enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much. Take care and bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, yes, before you go, please, can I take a screenshot? So please smile when I take my screenshot as an evidence of yes. So please, if you want to put on your camera, let me just take a screenshot at least to show my boss that yes, we did something. So hold on, please. Let me put it in gallery view. Okay. So I think I'll take the first one. So smile for the camera. I hope I'm smile. Okay, so let me save that. Okay, hold on, please. So capture. Okay. Yeah, hold on, please. So let me just take the second one. The second one. Yes, that's where I've got Dr. Balogun and co. So let me just take that. Okay. Done. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was a great session, Emmanuel. You've got other things to do now.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Chasi. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. It was so lovely to meet you. Really good session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel, for putting this together. This is amazing.
Thank you, Sammy, for hosting us as well. Thank you so much. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.